The day I found out my brother Nolan sold my late father's watch was the day I realized family could betray you deeper than anyone else. I stared at the empty space on my dresser where Dad's vintage Rolex had sat for years, a hollowness spreading through my chest. After his sudden passing 3 years ago, that watch was all I had left of the man who worked himself to the bone to give us a better life. Elaine mentioned it yesterday while I was helping her get ready for bed, Ethan said, his voice tinged with concern as we made our rounds at Oakwood Nursing Home. She was rambling about missing things and Nolan's debt problems. I froze, the med cart feeling heavier in my hands. Gran must have been lucid during one of her rare moments of clarity, the bold truth she had likely voiced out of fear or misplaced trust. That swindling, ungrateful leech, I growled, my fingers tightening around the cart handle. Ethan put a calming hand on my arm. Breathe, Callie. We don't know anything for sure yet. He was right, as usual. I forced air into my lungs, fuming at Nolan's latest depths, while reminding myself never to underestimate my grandmother's mind, despite her frailty. After our shift ended, I drove straight to the small home Gran and I shared, praying her thoughts were just confused ramblings. But when I opened her bedroom door, the empty space on her dresser where Dad's watch had sat firmly cemented my fears. Gran? I said softly, taking a seat by her bed. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded by age and memory loss. Where is my son's watch? She asked, her voice a heartbroken whisper. White-hot anger blazed through me. Nolan took it, didn't he? He had been stopping by more frequently, no doubt preying on Gran's fading lucidity. She nodded, fresh tears sliding down her papery cheeks. I thought he just wanted to wind it, but he never brought it back. The hurt in her eyes pierced me deeper than any knife could. Nolan's selfish greed had finally hit unforgivable depths by robbing his own grandmother, my dearest Gran, who had lost so much already. I pulled her bony hand into mine, using my other to wipe away her tears. It's okay, I'm here. We'll get it back. How, I didn't know, but I would move heaven and earth to make this right. Dad's watch wasn't about money, it was about preserving the few beautiful fragments we had left of him. Over the years, Nolan's chronic underachievement, debts, and swindling behavior had slowly alienated him from our fragmented family. But this was unforgivable. As the rage coursed through me, a seething promise burned in my heart. One way or another, I would make him pay for what he had taken from us. Nobody threatened what little family I had left without severe consequences. Not even my own brother. I should have seen the signs earlier, the little clues that exposed Nolan's latest betrayal. Like the new car he had no business buying or the designer clothes he suddenly started wearing. Overcompensating for his crumbling ego, no doubt. When he strolled into Gran's kitchen the next morning, reeking of expensive cologne, the anger came rushing back full force. Looking sharp, bro, I said through gritted teeth as he poured himself a coffee. Spend any of Gran's money on that new get-up? Nolan barely looked up, smirking into his mug. Don't know what you're talking about. Playing dumb doesn't suit you. I know what you did with Dad's watch. I slammed my hand down on the table, making his coffee slosh over the rim. And if you think for 1 second you're going to keep robbing Gran blind, you've got another thing coming. His eyes finally met mine, dark pits of selfishness and greed. That decrepit old woman doesn't even know what day it is. She has no idea what she signed over to me. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms. What did you do? Let's just say Elaine's ample nest egg is about to become my ample nest egg. I fought back the urge to lunge across the table at him, knowing he'd relish the violence. Why should I be surprised? I spat out. The words integrity and honor have never been in your vocabulary. Don't give me that self-righteous bull, Callie. You may have been Mom and Dad's perfect little angel, but I always saw you for what you really were. A green-eyed teacher's pet, jealous of my talents. A mirthless laugh burst from my lips. Talents? You mean your talent for conning and stealing from those closest to you? Your talent for slithering around life, taking whatever you want without an ounce of remorse? Nolan drained his mug and stood, his face twisting into a sneer. At least I'm not wasting my life as a lowly nurse, waiting hand and foot on ungrateful has-beens at a third-rate nursing home. His words landed like a sucker punch to the gut. Everything I had dedicated my life to meant nothing to this man. Aunt Viv was right all those years ago. Nolan truly was a scorpion, loyal to nobody except himself. Something inside me hardened as I watched him turn and begin to walk away, whistling cheerfully. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. My own flesh and blood had become a festering cancer that needed to be cut out. "Don't think for 1 second this is done," I called out, my voice trembling but determined. "If you honestly believe I'll let you drain Gran's life away into your grubby, thieving hands, you don't know me at all." Nolan paused in the doorway, not even bothering to look back. "We'll see about that, sis. We'll see." As the door slammed in his wake, I felt sick to my core. So many years thinking family was the unbreakable tether, no matter how frayed and dysfunctional the strands became. But Nolan had finally severed that bond completely. Blinding fury warred with the shattered sense of loss and grief cutting through my heart. But I couldn't wallow in the ruins. Not yet. I had promised Gran to make this right, no matter what it took. Determined, I pulled out my phone and hit Ethan's number on speed dial. He answered on the second ring, ever my rock in the turbulent seas of life. "Ethan, we have a situation, and I'm going to need your help to take down Nolan, once and for all." Ethan showed up within the hour, his worried frown deepening when I relayed the whole sordid story. "How could he?" he muttered, shaking his head. "Stealing from his own grandmother, that's a new low, even for Nolan." "You're telling me." I raked a hand through my hair, feeling the knot of dread and anger pulsing in my gut. "I can't let him drain Gran's accounts and throw her into some dilapidated home just to fund his selfish habits. We won't let that happen." Ethan put a reassuring hand on my arm. His calm, steady presence was a balm against the raging turmoil inside me. "First things first, we need to get the full story from Elaine before Nolan comes sniffing around again." I nodded, suddenly bone-weary from the emotional upheaval, but resolute. "You're right, let's go." We found Gran in her favorite recliner, struggling to work a crochet needle. Her eyes lit up as we entered. "Oh, Callie, dear? And young Ethan, too. What a lovely surprise." Crouching down beside her, I gently took her trembling hands in mine. "Gran, we need to talk about Nolan and what he's done." She instantly grew agitated, her brow furrowing. "That terrible boy stole your father's priceless watch. I thought he just wanted to wind it, but he never returned it." My heart constricted at her desolate expression. I gathered her hands and held them against my chest. "I know, Gran, and I promise you, I will get it back, no matter what I have to do." "Oh, but there's more," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper rife with fear. "More that wretched Nolan has taken." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his body tensing beside me. Gran's haunted gaze bounced between us. He said there were forms to sign. Legal documents regarding my finances and estate that would protect me. I was so confused, and he seemed so persuasive. The shards of ice crept up my spine. "You didn't," I choked out. "Please, Gran, tell me you didn't sign over control of your accounts and assets." Her watery eyes and trembling lips spoke the truth I dreaded. In a childlike voice she whimpered, "I'm so sorry, my dears. I fear I've made a terrible mistake." White-hot rage detonated in my chest as realization slammed into me like a freight train. That conniving snake had taken full legal advantage of Gran's fragile state, manipulating her into forfeiting everything over to his control. The money Dad had meticulously saved, the cozy house he'd bought for Gran after Mom's passing, all of it was now a blank check for Nolan's greed. That low-life, scamming piece of... My words disintegrated into an incoherent growl as I shot up from the floor, unable to be still. Ethan quickly moved to comfort Gran, who had dissolved into heartbroken sobs. Hey, we're going to fix this," he murmured, cradling her wizened face in his strong hands. "You didn't know what you were signing, Elaine. Nolan took full advantage, which makes this fraud. We can fight this." Fight it? At this point, I was ready to go nuclear. Yes, Nolan wouldn't see an inch of mercy or compromise from me, not after this grotesque violation of trust. He wanted to go scamming, exploitative war with his own family. So be it. I whipped around, nearly spitting fire. "We're taking him down, Ethan, and we're playing for keeps this time. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, Nolan's not walking away from this." After consoling Gran and getting her settled in for the evening, Ethan and I regrouped in the living room. The atmosphere was charged, both of us practically vibrating with determination. "Okay, let's map this out," Ethan said, running a hand over his jaw. We know Nolan committed fraud by manipulating Elaine into signing over her assets. That's a legal battle we can take him on. I nodded, my mind already spinning with strategies. Agreed, but we can't rely solely on that. You know how slippery Nolan operates. Ethan's brow furrowed. You think he'll try to wriggle his way out of it? I'd stake my life on it. I started pacing, feeling the pent-up fury propelling me forward. He'll latch onto any technicality or legal loophole to maintain control. So what are you suggesting? Ethan asked warily. Taking the law into our own hands is a risky line to cross, Callie. I stopped and turned to him, determination blazing in my eyes. I'm talking about dismantling him from every angle until he has no choice but to crumble. This can't just be a legal battle. It needs to be psychological warfare. Ethan held my intense stare for a few heartbeats before giving a resolute nod. All right, let's do this then, but we do it smart and leave nothing to chance. No acting rashly or handing Nolan any more ammo than he already has. Relief washed over me, knowing he was fully on my side. With Ethan's strategic mind and ethical code, we'd crack Nolan's devious facade once and for all. First, we need to get Gran's paperwork and documentation in order. Every statement, deed, and contract she signed, I stated firmly. Then, we acquire rock-solid evidence of Nolan's coercion and manipulation tactics. Like witness testimony from anyone who's dealt with his shady side before, Ethan replied, catching my meaning. Build an undeniable record of his predatory patterns. Exactly. We take that comprehensive file to the authorities and loophole-proof legal route. I felt the first hints of a smile tug my lips. But not before we expose Nolan's moral bankruptcy to everyone, his employers, friends, business associates. Purge that trust fund brat's life of anyone enabling his grotesque ego. Ethan gave a low whistle. Going scorched earth on him. I like your thinking, Nurse Ratched. The old film reference made me chuckle despite the circumstances. Hey, you're the one who called this psychological warfare. I stepped closer, holding Ethan's steady gaze. We keep each other centered, okay? I can't let my hatred for Nolan consume me, not when Gran and doing the right thing has to remain the priority. He reached out, giving my arm a reassuring squeeze. You've got me in your corner. We're a team, remember? Nolan doesn't stand a chance against us. The fire in my chest burned hotter, this time with righteous conviction. Together, Ethan and I began mapping out our multi-pronged attack, letting the adrenaline of combat mode take over. No matter how low Nolan stooped, we would be there to sever his sleazy tentacles and reclaim what he stole. His refusal to treat family as anything more than novable pawns disgusted me. But that was about to change in a permanent, brutal way. Nolan was finally going to learn just how frightening a protective force I could be when my loved ones were threatened. The old saying had never rung more true. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Well, Nolan had gnawed that hand to the bone, and this time he would be the one getting mauled. Over the next few days, Ethan and I operated like seasoned interrogators, meticulously gathering every shred of paperwork and evidence we could from Gran's affairs. Bank statements, property deeds, legal contracts, we organized it all into an airtight master file. This is looking pretty ironclad, Ethan murmured, eyes scanning the stack of incriminating documents. There's a clear pattern of Nolan exploiting Elaine's vulnerability and state of mind. I felt a grim satisfaction watching the case against my scumbag brother take shape. Good, that reptile deserves to be backed into an inescapable corner after what he pulled. So what's our next move? Ethan asked, meeting my fiery gaze. This is damning stuff. But you know, Nolan will have his army of shady lawyers working angles we can't foresee. He was right. My brother's penchant for wriggling out of responsibility was unparalleled. Simply lawyering up and playing defense wouldn't be enough to dismantle him completely. We need to go broader than just the legal route, I stated, feeling the ruthless determination solidifying my resolve. If we want to strip Nolan of all his slimy resources, exposing his moral bankruptcy to everyone he knows is crucial. Realization dawned on Ethan's face. Take out his support system, cut off his finances, and clout. Precisely. I began pacing, letting the strategy unfurl. We joined the fight on two fronts. Hit him with an unshakable legal case from one side, while dismantling his image and alienating all his enablers on the other. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. We put his exploitative behavior on blast to all his colleagues, employers, business associates. Watch as the cockroaches scatter when the light is shined on his true nature. Exactly. The fire blazed brighter in my chest. Nolan always did crave status and optics above all else. What better way to eviscerate that ego than reducing him to a leper in his precious social circles? A tiny smirk played across Ethan's lips. You're quite devious when you want to be, Callie Wilcox. It's kinda hot. I punched his arm, feeling lightheaded from the adrenaline spiking through me. Keep it professional, creep. We have a sleazeball to destroy. With our roadmap clearly outlined, Ethan and I went to work on the first phase, reaching out through every possible back channel to unite a coalition of Nolan's disgruntled former victims, colleagues, exes. The outpour of damning stories and testimonies about his underhanded dealings was staggering and utterly vindicating. It became shockingly clear how long of a trail of havoc Nolan had blazed throughout his life. So many lives disrupted, so much collateral damage, yet he never faced any consequences that stuck. Well, that was about to change. When we amassed what I considered to be an utterly demolishing dossier on Nolan's repugnant character and rap sheet, I made two very important calls. One to the district attorney's office regarding our legal case against him, and the other to the human resources director at Nolan's Tony investment firm in downtown Chicago. Within an hour, I received confirmation that a caseworker from Adult Protective Services would be stopping by Grand's to get a statement and request for an emergency order freezing Nolan's access to her finances. And by the end of the day, I had coordinated anonymously forwarding our entire employment file on Nolan to dozens of his colleagues, company higher-ups, business associates, and everyone else in his professional orbit. Phase 1 was officially underway. I could practically taste Nolan's misery already, as I imagined him having to lawyer up while watching his immaculate reputation get ruthlessly firebombed. But this was only a preview for how I planned to dismantle and crush him. After what he'd done to Gran and our family's legacy, Nolan didn't deserve a shred of mercy or leniency. As far as I was concerned, he was cancer that needed to be eradicated from our lives with extreme precision. Only then would I finally breathe free. The next few days were a dizzying blur of legal proceedings, mounting evidence, and the delicious implosion of Nolan's professional life. I eagerly awaited each new update from Ethan or the investigative team like a kid on Christmas morning. "You're not going to believe this one," Ethan said, sliding into the booth across from me at our usual diner. "I just got an email from Nolan's old supervisor at Goldman Sachs." I leaned in, hungry for any new morsels to feed my satisfied hunger. "Do tell." Apparently, right after we flooded their inboxes with the file, a review of Nolan's work history turned up some highly unethical and potentially illegal practices he was running. My eyes widened with glee. "You're kidding. Like what?" "A little financial advisor trick called churning," Ethan explained. "Basically executing excessive trades in client accounts to generate bigger commissions for himself." I gave a slow whistle. "So not just screwing over family, but ripping off clients too? I'm starting to think depraved grifter was too kind a label for Nolan." "Starting to? I already pegged him at industrialized supervillain." Ethan's expression darkened. "Listen to this. Apparently Goldman's now reviewing all client accounts Nolan managed for potential fraud and self-dealing." The gravity of how deep this was going hit me like a sledgehammer. "Wait, so he could actually be facing criminal charges?" Ethan nodded grimly. "If they can prove intent to defraud investors and unlawful profit? You betcha. We're talking serious prison time for multiple counts like embezzlement and corruption." A vindicated cackle burst from my chest. "Oh my God, Ethan. This is unbelievable." I pounded the table, unable to keep still in my euphoria. "We took down the great and powerful scumbag." "Hey, save some of that energy. We still have the civil case ahead regarding your grandmother's finances, remember?" Ethan said warningly, though I detected a hint of pride beneath his serious tone. "Nolan isn't out of the woods yet." I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a long, calming breath. Ethan was right, as usual. Best not to celebrate total victory prematurely in case Nolan managed to slither out of the financial crimes charges. We had to keep the pressure firmly applied. Besides, savoring his impending humiliation at the custody hearing would be pleasure enough for now. Sure enough, over the next 2 days, every news headline and media blog seemed to be rehashing Nolan's spectacular downfall from his investment firm. Apparently, our file hadn't just gotten him immediately terminated. It sparked a review uncovering an entire trail of misappropriated funds and likely racketeering activities spanning years. The delicious irony of how he had worked so hard curating a glamorous image as a wildly successful master of the universe was not lost on me. All it took was a few muckraking truth bombs to demolish that facade permanently. When the inevitable call came from Nolan, I didn't know whether to laugh or spit nails. "You conniving little bitch!" His gravelly voice was practically shaking with rage. "You're behind all this? Those lies about me at Goldman?" "Oh, they were lies? Were they?" I replied coolly, inspecting my nails. "Funny, the dozen or so clients looking to testify about your crooked dealings with their investment accounts don't seem to think so." There was a long pause, then Nolan sputtered, "You've gone too far this time, Callie." "Have I?" I drawled. "Way I see it, you never should have messed with family. Betraying Gran's trust and pillaging her estate to fund your greed, you got exactly what you deserved, bro." A humorless chuckle crackled through the line. "You arrogant son of a—" Static burst through the phone. He'd hung up. I didn't care. My point had been made loud and clear. The first bomb in my multi-pronged takedown of Nolan had landed right on target, completely destabilizing and disgracing him in his professional realm. All that remained was shattering him in the place it would hurt most, our family's world. As I felt the ruthless vindication course through me, I sensed Nolan's desperation rising in tandem with each rung of status and reputation he lost, which meant he was about to get very dangerous, very soon. Fortunately, I relished the thought of reducing him to a feral, snarling animal backed into a corner. It was time for round 2. The day of the custody hearing, Nolan arrived like a menacing storm cloud, trailed by not one but 3 high-priced shark lawyers. His eyes locked on me with a look that could incinerate as I took my seat beside Gran. "Don't worry, we've got this," Ethan murmured, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. I managed a tight nod, anger and determination thrumming through me. This wouldn't be like all the other times Nolan slithered his way out of consequences. Not today. As the proceedings began, I could feel Nolan's seething glares burning holes through me. His lawyer, a sleek viper in Armani, struck first. "Your Honor, my client is the legal holder of Miss Elaine Wilcox's power of attorney and healthcare directive," he stated, placing a small mountain of papers on the bench. "All decisions regarding her care and finances are well within his purview as designated agent." My own lawyer, a young spitfire named Jamie, immediately pounced. "Those documents were acquired through coercion and undue influence while Miss Wilcox was in a compromised mental state. We have sworn testimonies and records indicating a clear pattern of exploitation by Mr. Nolan Wilcox over an elderly family member he should have been protecting." She turned and nodded to me. "Here we go." I stood and locked eyes with the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. "Your Honor, my brother's relentless pursuit of personal gain came at the expense of preying on our beloved grandmother's ailing mind after our parents' tragic deaths." I pulled out the weathered gold watch, Dad's treasured Rolex that started this whole crusade. He first demonstrated his crude disregard for our family by stealing this heirloom from Gran for a quick sale. Nolan shot up, his face mottled with rage. "You lying." "Sit down and be quiet, Mr. Wilcox," the judge barked, silencing him instantly. She fixed me with an intense stare. "Please continue, Miss Wilcox." Bolstered, I carried on like a force of nature. From there, he systematically manipulated and coerced Gran into transferring control of her entire estate and assets into his name. I locked scorching eyes with Nolan as I spoke the next words with relish, all to indulge his excessive spending habits and feed his addiction to living well beyond his means, by any corrupt means necessary. Jamie jumped in again, passing a thick dossier to the judge. "Your Honor, enclosed are documented incidents from Mr. Wilcox's banking, employment, and personal records, demonstrating a continuous and reprehensible pattern of fraud, exploitation, and downright criminal behavior." She pinned Nolan with a hard look. "We have more than sufficient evidence to not only remove his custodial rights over the protected party, but but to pursue financial injury claims, potential criminal charges, and have him institutionally prohibited from acting as any person's legal guardian or executor. A deafening silence fell over the courtroom as the weight of the evidence and Jamie's words sank in. Something akin to fear finally flashed across Nolan's features as his lips moved wordlessly. The judge fixed him with a withering gaze. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Mr. Wilcox?" For once, he seemed to find no easy words or smarmy reply, no weaselly exit to slither through. I watched in dark satisfaction as Gran's tormentor squirmed, undoubtedly seeing the walls close in around him for the first time. After years of exploiting and betraying with impunity, his reign of unchecked arrogance had finally met its reckoning. One by one, the judge reviewed each damning document, pausing occasionally to level Nolan with another scathing look over her glasses. The sweltering silence stretched until I thought it might combust. Finally, she set down the final paper with an insistent thud, fixing Nolan with a hardened glare that could cut diamonds. In light of overwhelming evidence of fraud, coercion, financial exploitation, and severely disqualifying moral turpitude, I am summarily revoking your power of attorney over the affairs and assets of Elaine Wilcox, effective immediately. My heart soared as the judge continued, her words clanging like iron against Nolan's depleted defenses. Custodial authority over Miss Wilcox's financial estate and personal care is hereby awarded to Callie Wilcox, her granddaughter. This court will also be entering Mr. Nolan Wilcox into the state's registry, prohibiting him from ever serving as a legal guardian, executor, or holding disbursement rights over any protected person's finances or property. She let that devastating ruling sink in for a few agonizing moments before delivering the coup de grace. Furthermore, I am referring the extensive evidence presented here today to the District Attorney's Office to be reviewed for potential criminal charges related to fraud, embezzlement, and financial mistreatment of an elderly person. The world seemed to stop as Nolan's face drained of what little color remained. I squeezed Gran's hand fiercely as we watched the karmic anvil obliterate the last of his defenses. At long last, the nightmare was over, and the devil had finally gotten his due. In the days following the custody ruling, it was like a dense cloud of dread had been lifted from Gran's little home. As I moved her belongings and oversaw her transfer to Oakwood, under my sole authority now, there was a long-absent sense of lightness in the air. "I can't tell you how good it feels to have that cancerous influence finally excised," Gran said warmly, as I fluffed her pillows in the lovely private suite I had secured. "Nolan always did live a life of karmic debt. I suppose it finally came due." I felt a pang thinking about how his toxic depravity had tainted so many chapters of our family's story. But not anymore. "Well, his debt to us has officially been settled," I stated with finality. "Ethan showed me the latest court documents. They're hitting Nolan with a laundry list of criminal fraud charges to go along with the civil penalties." Gran's eyes widened in surprise. "Criminal charges? My goodness." I shook my head grimly. "He brought this on himself, Gran. No more escaped consequences. He's going to be held accountable for his actions this time. Fully." Her wizened face softened with an almost pitying look. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like she might speak some words of saintly grace about seeing the good in people or forgiveness. But the shadow passed quickly. "You're quite right, my dear. Some deeds are simply too poisonous to absolve easily." We settled into a comfortable quiet, taking solace in how the choking menace of Nolan's greed and exploitation had finally dissipated. Almost as if on cue, there was a gentle rap at the door before Ethan peeked his head in. "There are my two favorite ladies," he beamed, breezing in with his usual warm energy. "Everything getting settled nicely in here?" "It's beautiful, Ethan," Gran replied, reaching out to pat his arm affectionately. "Thanks to both of you, an old woman's fool fantasies of being thrown away are put to rest." I caught the tenderness passing between the two of them, as only Gran could. Despite her lucidity lapses, she could still read people's souls with uncanny empathy and wisdom. "Well, this old woman deserves only the best," I said firmly, standing to usher Ethan aside for a private word. As I passed, Gran caught my hand and gave it a conspiratorial squeeze, her own silent message of approval. Out in the hall, I drew a steadying breath before meeting Ethan's eyes. I can't even begin to thank you for everything, really, for being by my side through this whole insane saga. He cut me off by cupping my face in his strong hands, his touch sending an electric current through me. You don't need to thank me, Callie. Being your partner in that war zone was the easiest decision I've ever made. The devotion in his eyes ignited fireworks in my chest. We had been tiptoeing around the depth of our connection for so long, the unspoken bond growing stronger, even as we pretended it was simply best friendship. But nothing felt unspoken now. Not after the trial by fire we had endured together against Nolan's toxicity. In this moment, I was acutely aware of how everything had changed between us in the most visceral yet exquisite way. I slid my palms up the crisp cotton of Ethan's shirt, closing the last few inches between us. You were the only light in that darkness for me, I murmured, searching his soulful eyes. I couldn't have survived it alone. His hand slipped lower, settling on the curve of my waist as he drew me flush against him. The simmering promise in his touch made me shiver. Then I guess we're in this together from here on out, he replied in a low rumble. If you'll have me, that is. I melted into his embrace, bringing our lips infinitesimally closer as a radiant smile broke across my face. No other way I'd have it. As our mouths finally fused in a searing, passionate exchange, I felt the last vestiges of Nolan's toxic stranglehold evaporate. In its place blossomed new life, new light, new love, the brilliant possibilities extending into our future. All the turmoil and angst had been faced and conquered. Out of the ashes rose the indomitable hope of new beginnings, and a family's legacy finally restored.